Welcome to this week's edition of Fun Activities in 5. This week we are looking at a reading activity, an activity to get your kids reading more voluntarily to complete the activity and to read more in order to provide evidence for their answers. So one of the reasons I love this activity we're looking at today is because it really hits a lot of those higher level skills that world language people, especially if you are CI or ADI, get accused of not using very often, even though we are. So today we are looking at alphabet reading. Alphabet reading is something that I learned from my 6th graders a couple years ago because they did an activity similar in their English class. I'll tell you how they did it in English, and I'll tell you how I do it because I couldn't handle the chaos level of it in English. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a text. You can take one that is already written that you have the ability to manipulate a little bit, or you can write your own. When you are taking this text to manipulate it or write your own, you want it to look like this. This is the same text, but instead of being written in paragraphs, it's written in chunks of 1 to 2 sentences, basically just spaced out with a letter next to it. That letter is going to be really important because that's how students are going to cite their evidence later. So in English class, the way that students read this, or the way that it worked in English, is students read this text. The teacher called out a question in groups of 4. Students had a piece of paper they wrote their answer on, cited their evidence, ran up to the board, wrote the answer on the board, and the teams that did it correctly got points, but if they did it faster, they got more points. And then they would kind of like rotate like that. I'm not a big fan of that style in my classroom. One, where I teach now, there's just not room for people to be getting up and running around. And 2, I feel like it gives you an out to not read if you're in a group of 4. Sure, maybe you read before, but you probably didn't if you knew you weren't going to be in a group with somebody who was going to read. So the way I do the question answer piece is I give students a list of questions that look like this. And this list of questions, 70% of it does not change every time I do this activity. They are very, very, very general questions on purpose. Things like, who are the characters? Describe the characters. What is the setting? I do give them these questions in English. I also allow them to answer the questions in either English or in Spanish because I have them cite their answer. So what that means is whenever they answer the question, who are the characters in this story, they are saying the character is a crocodile named Charlie. I know that because in section A it says, hay un cocodrilo se llama Charlie. And they list that off. In section F it says, there is a flamingo named Fiona, and they write that down. So they're citing the target language text to back up their answer, whether their answer is in English or in Spanish. So for me, it doesn't matter. If it matters for you, you could make your directions to only write in the target language. The big kicker with this, and where the rereading really comes in handy with this activity, is how you start and how you finish. So when I originally give my students that alphabet text, this paper, when I originally give my students this paper, that's all they get. They do not get the questions. I have them go take the paper and highlight anything that they think is important to the story, anything they think the story would not be the same without. And then I have them come show me. They have to show me their highlights or underlines or circles or however you do it in your room to get the question paper. If I am not satisfied with the amount of information that they have highlighted on that story, I send them back to read again and to highlight again. This typically for me takes around 30 minutes no matter how long the text is, because I send students back at least one time to go reread before I give them their paper. Then they get this question paper. When they get the question paper, I make sure they read the directions. I put the directions up on my board, but a big piece of the directions students miss is they have to write in a complete sentence, whether it's Spanish or English. So when I check their answers, the first thing I look for is a complete sentence. The second thing I look for is they have to cite evidence. If they have not cited evidence, they get sent back to reread and redo their answers. All in all, this activity typically takes me at least 1 class period, sometimes 2. It's also a great sub-plan activity. It's a great way to get students rereading, looking for backup details, supporting evidence, and having students justify responses. If you have not tried out alphabet reading or super secret rereading, as I like to call it in my room, you can check out the blog post linked in the comments of this video. If you have tried it, I'd love to hear how it goes, and I will see you next week.